Hey, this is the FlyTyinGuy, and I'm going to show you how to tie my streamer pattern I call the Natty Light. To start this fly, we're going to take a size 4 Octopus Gamakatsu hook, and it's going to be our stinger hook for this articulated fly. For the articulation, I'm going to take some Cortland Toothy Critter 20-pound test tieable steel leader. I'm going to take about 6 inches of that stuff. It's pretty bendable, and I'm going to bite down a little crease there right at the top so I can get this through the eye of the hook a little easier. Let's go ahead and bite that down, thread it through. Once we get it through, let's pop this hook out of the vise, and I'm just going to wrap that right over top of that and do a little half hitch just like that. So it's not even really a knot, it's just a little loop connection to the eye of this hook. Go ahead and clamp that back in whenever we're ready. And I'm going to take some gel spun thread. I'm just going to do a nice little thread base here. Color is not too important with the thread because most of the thread will be covered. And I'm going to take some copper flash ice dubbing, just some longer strand flash, and this is a great pattern great material I use in a lot of my patterns. I'm just going to take a little pinch of that, and this is going to be the flash for our tail. There's one thing I've learned about tying streamers. It's a good thing to have flash, but sometimes, a lot of times, you don't want too much flash. So you got to really be careful how much flash you're putting into your fly. You don't want to overdo it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a Magnum sized Zonker strip in a natural color. This fly can be tied with all sorts of different colors. I've done an olive color and mostly natural for this fly. That's why I call it the Natty Light. And we're just going to kind of size it up to our hook there, pull the hair back wherever you want to tie it in, and I'm going to take my whip finisher and just kind of pull some of those hairs out so we get a nice direct tie down. Go ahead and wet it down with some saliva. Place it right on the top of that hook, close to the eye. Do a couple loose wraps, and then go ahead and crank down and really get this rabbit secured. And wrap it into the front of the hook. And I'm just going to do a couple half hitches here. And we'll put some super glue on all those thread wraps just to make sure it's not going anywhere. Next step is we're going to take a size 6 streamer hook with a copper cone head on it. Go ahead and do a nice thread wrap all the way down the shank of the hook, almost to the end. And we're going to tie in that second half, the bottom half of that fly. So kind of line it up, mainly by the hair, and see where we want to tie that in. That looks pretty good right about there. So I'm going to go ahead and do loose wraps all the way up the shank, just to make sure that we'll keep that wire on top of the shank of the hook. And then once I have it kind of how I want it, then we'll start cranking down and secure that in really tight. So work your way down and let's go back up. These are really tight wraps. I'm putting a lot of pressure on. And we'll go ahead and fold this section, this rest of the steel leader back. We'll tie it in right there just to make sure this won't slip. And with just a regular pair of scissors, not your fly tying scissors, go ahead and clip that steel leader. And let's wrap all the way back, some other secure wraps. There's no way that this fly is going to separate. I also put a light dabbing of super glue along those thread wraps. Next step, I'm going to take some .025 lead wire. I'm just going to wrap the shank of the hook right over top of the thread wraps. Clip off the excess. And we're going to go with our thread and just run some loops through this wire, secure it down. Next step, we're going to take a little bit more of that copper ice dub, really lightly, and we're just going to add a little more flash to the abdomen of this fly. Secure that in. I'm going to do that on both sides. Clip off all that excess material. At this point, we're going to be using some Grizzly marabou feathers. They're just looking just like this. You can tie some in right here. If you feel like the fly's not beefy enough, you can tie a set in back here. I'm just going to leave it as is. In our next step, we're going to take some polar chenille in yellow and just do some wraps over that lead wire. You're not even really see this yellow that much. It just kind of covers up that lead wire and kind of imitates maybe a brown trout belly or triggers some other instinct in those fish. Make sure you're pulling these fibers out as you wrap. Just do a quick wrap through. Once we have that done, we'll go ahead and clip that off. Pull back those fibers. Lay a couple more wraps down. I'm keeping my thread wraps on that lead wire. It's going to be a little easier to tie in those feathers here in a second. So our next step is we're going to take our Grizzly marabou feathers and we're just going to lay them right across the shank of that hook. And you can see this feather kind of imitates the lateral line of the fish. So we want to make sure that that stays out level with the fly. We have that down like that. I'm going to do that to both sides. I like picking a feather that has quite a bit of bars in it. I feel like that triggers that predatory instinct in those fish a little better. So once we have those in, we'll go ahead and clip off those tails here. It's looking pretty good. Now our next step is we're going to take our rabbit fur and we're going to pull it right over top, making sure that those feathers are staying outside. Once I have it where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and pull back some of that hair. So once we have that rabbit where we want it, let's go ahead and tie that down. A couple loose wraps and then really crank down on this. As for the head of the fly, we have a few options here. I like doing either a wool head, which is just some standard sculpin wool, and I just dub it on there. And I also like using these Grizzly marabou feathers for the head, and we're going to try that right now. Just kind of wrap some feathers. It'll take probably 3 or 4 feathers to make a good head. Let's go ahead and take one of your feathers, and we're going to tie it in from the tip. Let's leave a little bit out there so we can kind of flare up a little bit. A couple wraps, and then we'll just go ahead and wrap that around. Like I said, this will take a couple feathers till we got it looking how we want it. So once we have our feathers tied in, we'll just build up a little thread base. I'm going to go ahead and whip finish. You have to keep in mind that although this fly looks kind of bulky right now, once those marabou feathers get wet, they shrink down to about half the size, and it's a really lean looking streamer. And there she is. You can see with this fly it has excellent mobility with that articulated hook. I'll also take this hook of that streamer hook, the size 6 streamer hook, and I'll go ahead and just clip that off. And there you have it. That is our Natty Light streamer, and it's an excellent pattern for Colorado, Montana, anywhere where there's big brown trout that are hungry. It's a great fall pattern, and like I said, you can do a couple variations. You can do a wool head. You can also do this pattern in olive. Pretty much get creative and see what happens. Appreciate it a lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.